What's going on, Geminites? It's your boy Gem Mint back in the house with another top 10 list. I did a top 10 favorite omnibus video, and I knew there was going to be a little bit of hate. There was only one DC book on there, but I had to keep it real. That was my personal favorite top 10. But to redeem myself, we're going to do a top 10 absolute edition list. I'm going to consider any book that's the same size, that has that hardcover slipcase, any absolute format style book. So it could be DC books, Vertigo books, Image, whatever. As long as it fits that format, it's going to be eligible for the list. If you guys want to know what's on my top 10, stay tuned. Alright guys, number 10 on my list is The Absolute Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. To me, these types of graphic novels are what absolute editions are for. You have this epic story, classic. Alex Ross doing the interiors, which he rarely does. Mark Waid, great futuristic story with an older cast of Superman with the Reed Richards hair, and Batman can't really function because he's old and he has like this, metal things like Forrest Gump leg braces. So this is coming in at number 10 on my list. Great story, a great one sitting read the whole thing type of book. Just a great overall story. And Alex Ross, that's really enough. So Absolute Kingdom Come, that's going to be number 10 on my list. Real quick, we'll show the wraparound slipcase. The only thing I don't really like about this slipcase is that it doesn't have any text on the spine. Because all my spines I do slipcase out. Most of them look like they're supposed to be that way. For this video, we'll do it the wrong way. Number 9 on my list. This is where the hate starts. That's not an absolute edition. Wrong. Let's compare these things. Same height? Check. Pretty much the same width? Check. Hardcover slipcase? Check. I am going to say The Walking Dead, and I just brought out the first volume, but just the run as a whole. Epic to have this collected in absolute format. Say what you want to say about the show. I actually stopped watching it, I think, midway last season, and the show really sucks. But if you start reading this from issue 1 again, you'll realize why The Walking Dead became The Walking Dead, man. The comic by Robert Kirkman was just a great read. So much character development. The whole book is character development. Those first issues with Tony Moore, they're just epic, man. I absolutely love The Walking Dead comic. I have stopped reading it around the time where Negan meets up with the Whisperers. So I don't know what issue that was, but that's where I'm up to. It's one of those books that's black and white, and you read a couple panels and you forget that it's black and white. It's just, it's awesome, it's gory, it's unpredictable. You can't think about the show when you think about this book. This book is way, way more exciting than the show. It's just way better overall. They have classy, black, leather-bound books with embossed spines. They have dust jackets and a hardcover slipcase. I'm actually not a fan of dust jacket on absolutes. A lot of times it makes it difficult to get the books out. I'm looking at you, Sinestro Corps. But awesome run. I think there's 7 volumes of these, 7 or 8 volumes. But number 9 on the list, y'all. So we're showing independent love and DC love. Alright. Oh, see? Slipcase too. Number 8 on my list is The Absolute Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. This is kind of similar to Kingdom Come, my thoughts. You have 4 issues or mini trade paperbacks or whatever you want to call it, collected in an absolute format, iconic story. This changed the game for superhero comic books when it came out in the 80s. Here's a slipcase here. Basically, it really introduced us into the dark world of superheroes, right? You have this, again, older but beefier version of Bruce Wayne. He's just brutal. You have kind of like some politics going on, right? Then you have what Joker's on the on the talk show. You've got this race of mutants. You've got Frank Miller kind of with his unorthodox style of art. Even the paneling is kind of weird. But it's a really epic story. Obviously, it like I mentioned, it was groundbreaking. It got a lot of people back into comics around that time. Just giving you a more adult-themed story. Right? This brutal fight between Batman and the mutant in the mud. Crazy fight, man. You got Joker with his all-white suit getting his kingpin on. I need to go back and reread this. But number 8 on my list, man. Absolute Dark Knight Returns. Or Absolute Dark Knight. Number 7 on my list, Absolute Promethea. I'm surprised that this is on my list. I just really love this story, man. I did a recent reads on it. I think you could tell in that review that I was really into the story. Not so much the actual superhero character, but just like the world that Alan Moore creates here. Speaking of Alan Moore, this was published under his America's Best Comics title, so this is technically not a DC release. But go watch my review. You know, if you're wondering why does Absolute Promethea go on there, blah, blah, blah. You know, first of all, the art deserves an oversized format. The art by, what's his face? Williams III. I feel like it's James Williams III. I could be wrong. It's definitely Williams. Has crazy paneling and an intricate detail in between the panels, and panels that go clockwise, panels that are symmetrical like this, and the art is just really great. The story is really great. You wouldn't think so looking at something like this is one of the covers, but trust me, Absolute Promethea, or if you could just read Promethea in general, I like this issue that they use photography instead of drawings. Absolute Promethea is dope. Trust me, read it however you could read it, and then holla back and tell me I'm wrong. Number 7 on the list. All right, number 6 on the list, kind of following that same kind of vibe, man. Absolute Sandman. Not only is it an iconic story, another one in the 80s that kind of reinvented what comics could be, but one of the most impressive physical books out of the Absolute library. First of all, the slipcases are a little bit more durable. The art is kind of out there and kind of creepy. But these books, you feel like you're reading something important. It feels like a Bible, or it feels like, I don't know, man. It just feels like some ancient text that you're holding or whatever. Even this. What is this? Like the fabric of at a fancy restaurant or something. Anyway, Neil Gaiman, or Gaiman, I don't know how to pronounce that. The story is a little weird at times. I got lost a few times, but I found my way back. This was the first recent reads that I did for the channel. So if you want to know more about the book, you can go ahead and read that. But this is like not superhero comic books, non-spandex, you know what I mean? Non-heroes, right? Just storytelling in comic book form, man. This is about the endless, man. Dream, death, I forget all their names. It's been a while since I read it. Destruction. What are the other ones? I don't know. The 4 D's of dodgeball: duck, dive, dip, duck, and dodge. Anyway, this is on my list for every reason: for the story, for the art, for the actual book itself. Sandman, Absolute. There's like 7 volumes or some shit. Vertigo published title. I still do need to read the prequel Absolute that came out, the Overture, because I've read the 5 volumes, I've read the Death spinoff, and I need to read that Overture. All right, number 5 on the list, man, The Boys by Garth Ennis. Again, not technically an Absolute, it's technically a definitive edition, but it's an Absolute. Hardcover, slipcase, dust jacket, it's got all the signs. The Boys, I think this is the first Garth Ennis book that I've ever read, and I think it was the first non-superhero story. I know it has superheroes in it, but they're in the background, right? This is really about what happens when you can't control superheroes, or who watches the Watchmen. It's kind of like what the premise of this is, right? Like, it's like behind the curtains of what happens with superheroes, and they're not all that they're cracked up to be. When I first read this, I bought these editions because I was getting into omnibus, I was getting into absolutes. These were like sought after books, so I figured I'll hunt them down. And when I read them, man, I couldn't put them down. I thought this was the ish. I read them a couple years ago, and I recently did a not so recent read, so you can go check it out to hear like more in depth about the boys and what it's all about, and see more of the interiors. But Garth Ennis, man, funny, crazy, adult themed. It was definitely my cup of tea. So when I have Volume 1, it's not because Volume 1's the best. I'm just talking about the whole series in general as absolutes. So boom, The Boys, number 5 on the list. You need to read The Boys, and they got a show coming out. Number 4 on the list, man, we have the Batman Absolute Court of Owls, the Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, the only Batman Absolute that we have for this run. Not counting that Batman Incorporated and all that crap. But man, this was the new 52 run. The Batman. I mean, first of all, I'm a huge Greg Capullo fan from the Spawn days. Like, I love Spawn, I love Greg Capullo, and I love reading Batman. And the Court of Owls not only had great artwork, but Scott Snyder, one of the best writers of our generation for sure, man. This Court of Owls storyline that introduces the idea that there's this secret society that's been living in Gotham the whole time, under Bruce Wayne's nose. They have these cool enforcers called the Talons, which always kind of reminded me of the creature from Hellboy that's like made out of sand or whatever the hell, with the whole cranking the heart thing. Thought it was upside down, but that's just this. I think that's part of that maze story. I'll tell you, it's a damn shame that they didn't just complete this run in absolute editions. I mean, what is the deal? You're printing out the Wonder Woman Absolutes and the Omnibus with the same damn material, but we can't get the rest of the Batman run? Batman? Anyway, I don't need to say anything more about this. Number 4 on the list, Court of Owls. It was actually the topic of our first ever live show on the channel. So if you want to go back and watch that awkwardness. But, we still held it down. Boom, number 3 on the list, The Absolute Watchmen. Another Alan Moore book. Another book that deserves the absolute treatment. There's some books out there that don't. I don't know if that wasn't clear reading between the lines. The Absolute Watchmen. Watchmen is a book that I didn't get at first, right? Because I wasn't into comics when this came out. I remember watching the movie and thinking, man, this fake-ass Batman and this fake-ass Superman, like, what is this? And I watched the movie, I didn't think anything of it. When I got back into comics around, it had to be like 2012, like at the time what was happening, like Spider Island was happening, Avengers vs. X-Men was happening, and I remember asking my man at Past Present Future Comics in South Florida, shout out to my man Xavier, I asked him, hey, what's a good read? And he goes, have you ever read Watchmen? I said, nope. So I bought the trade paperback and I got it. Like, I read it and I was like, holy shit. You just gotta like lose the fact that these characters aren't characters you're familiar with, and boom. Watchmen was a 12-issue run by Alan Moore. I think it was in the late 80s as well. Let me see. I don't want to be fake news over here. Yeah, 1988. From my understanding, that Alan Moore wrote this story with the idea to use the DC characters, but DC was like, nah, bruh, we're not doing that. Read this book. It's very similar to the movie. The ending is different, similar but different. But this is a classic. This is like for the same reasons that The Dark Knight Returns is classic. This is not your typical saving cats out of a tree superhero and spandex book. This is dark. This is gritty. This is real life. And it's smart comics, man. Guys like Alan Moore and Garth Ennis and Warren Ellis and Grant Morrison, man, these guys are on a whole other level with mature comics, man. Number 2 on the list, bet you thought this was going to be number 1. This was my favorite read of 2018. Absolute Preacher is up there as number 2 on my favorite Absolute editions for every reason you could think of. For Garth Ennis writing, which I enjoyed as much as The Boys, even more so. The actual construction of these books rivaled only by Sandman as the top two, but I think this one, it might got it beat. I don't know. It doesn't have as much embossing or whatever, but it's got that gold foil. It's got that, again, ancient text, reading the scrolls type of vibe. And the artwork is good as well, which is funny because I'm, rest in peace, but I was never a Steve Dillon fan. I always felt like it must be his later stuff where everyone kind of has similar looks, their similar facial expressions. I mean, I just wasn't really a Steve Dillon fan. But in this book, I don't know, it must have been him at his prime because it doesn't really fault the book like I think it does in like some of the Punisher stuff and some of his other stuff. Don't think about the show. I think I only watched the first season. The book is its own beast. Don't even compare the two. One of my, like I said, my favorite read last year. One of my favorite Absolute editions. One of my favorite storylines of all time. Absolute Preacher, Garth Ennis, Steve Dillon. All right, guys. Before we get into what my number one favorite Absolute edition is, and some of you guys are probably guessing or trying to guess, let's count down what we've gone over. Number 10, Absolute Kingdom Come, Mark Waid, Alex Ross. Number 9 is the whole Walking Dead series in Absolute format, Absolute Dark Knight by Frank Miller. Number 7, Absolute Promethea by Alan Moore. Number 6, Absolute Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Number 5 is The Boys by Garth Ennis. Number 4 is The Absolute Court of Owls by Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo. Number 3 is Absolute Watchmen by Alan Moore. Number 2 is The Preacher by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon. And I want to throw out some honorable mentions. So I did sell a couple of Absolute editions that I had in omnibus format. I sold Absolute Blackest Night, and I don't know that it would have still made the list. It was a dope Absolute edition. I just want to give it a little shout out. I was considering it, even though I don't have it anymore. And the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale Batman Omnis, which are great. They might be number 11 or 12, but wasn't top 10. Anyway, for the moment you all been waiting for, my number one favorite Absolute edition in all of the Gempire. Get ready to be disappointed or extremely happy. Spawn by Todd McFarlane. Man, I am a huge Spawn fan. Spawn is my jam and my jelly and the bread. When I was a kid and I was collecting comics in the 90s, Spawn covers are what stood out to me, and those are the ones that I bought. I love the character. I love the artwork. The story was dope. Heaven and hell, angel and demon, hero with a crazy messed up face with crazy powers, and I love these deluxe editions, man. They've only made 4 volumes so far that collect the first 100 issues. I wish they would hurry up and make the rest. I think that, this is something that I would never sell. The Spawn stuff that I could always turn to and read. Oh, and how fitting it's the page that has all the other characters in DC and Marvel locked up, which was like a jab from Todd McFarlane at the time. The binding on this is getting messed up. I could hear it. I could see it. It's not looking good. But boy, I love me some Spawn. Considered, I guess, a deluxe edition. But like I said, man, we counting them. If it's this same size with a hardcover, we're counting it. All right, guys. So that's my top 10 favorite Absolute format style books. We had to show some love to DC. I do like DC, even though I don't collect the statues. I'm a big fan of the comics. I think that's where they really shine, more than Marvel in most cases. And we were able to highlight some independent stuff, man. Some Image stuff, some America's Best Comics, some Dynamite, Vertigo, which is an offshoot of DC. So let me know what you think about my top 10 list. And remember, it's my favorite list. So don't tell me I'm wrong, because that's my favorite. Spawn is my number one out of all these. Drop me a like on the way out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more top 10 lists, more daily content, more statue unboxing and reviews, more Comic-Con coverage, more trailer reactions, more of the hardest working dude on YouTube. Holla at your boy. Peace. In all of the Gempire.